Welcome back to the Nick Bartlett Show, everybody. The football show where a former benchwarmer basketball player breaks down college football games. So we're still in the midst of interviewing media and other personnel from Super West teams and their non-conference opponents. For today, we got a nice little matchup in Washington-Boise State. And joining me on the show today is Jordan Kaye of Bronco Nation News. So thank you for coming on the show, Jordan.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course. And so today we got a Pacific Northwest, Inland Northwest matchup for those of you who don't know what the Inland Northwest is, but yeah, so in all seriousness, though, both these teams have the potential to win their conference, and this should be a really exciting. You always got to say a little bit, but this should actually be a good early season game. So I'm going to get the questions headed your way, Jordan. How has the feel of Boise's program changed since Taylor Green took over last year?
It's night and day. I last year, a lot of fans kind of thought, since they started following the team, the beginning of last year was the most embarrassing, you know, Boise State product they had ever seen. The Boise State went 2-2 to start the year. They barely squeaked out wins against New Mexico and FCS, like UT Martin, and then they lost by like three scores at UTEP. It was just a brutal loss. And there was genuine questions of like, hey, what direction is this program going in? And then obviously Andy Avalos, coach, fired offensive coordinator Tim Plow. Hank Bachmeier, the 4-year starting quarterback, just transferred, and they implemented Taylor Green. Luckily they had former NFL coach Dirk Cutter just like on staff, so he filled in for the back half of the season. But what Taylor Green allowed them to do was operate a completely different like RPO offense, because his legs, they're monitoring him on the GPS right now at like over 23 miles an hour. He is one of the fastest quarterbacks in college football. And with his running ability, all of a sudden defenses were giving them such different looks where they had to account for a quarterback. So all of a sudden, there's a defensive end or a linebacker that's basically spying him sometimes, and they're really trying to close the gap, and make sure the box is loaded so that he doesn't run. But he's so fast he can get to the outside. They were able to do a lot more screen passes, a lot more slants. Their complete offensive dynamic just shifted, and it's given kind of Boise State a ton of hope heading into this season.
Yeah, definitely. We do a little bit of I should say we have some guys who do a lot more Boise State coverage than I do, but from following a little
Yeah.
bit last year, it felt like once Bachmeier left down to Louisiana or wherever it was exactly, things
Yeah.
definitely it felt a little better for sure. Um, so this is a big question I have here, though. Getting right to the kind of the meat of the game. How do you feel Boise State's line will hold up against the Washington D line that really they could prove pretty elite this year? And are there any names that we should know outside of tackle Cade Beresford?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because you think of Washington just as this offensive juggernaut, and then you go look at their defense, and it's like, oh, they're pretty good too. They were ranked, I think, second in the Pac-12 last season. Granted, that was like still like 70th in the nation in yards, so not always the best stats, but you know when your offense is so high powered, like the defense is just kind of going to give up more yards because they're on the field more. But yeah, I think the offensive line, they've had some changes. They're trying out a new center these last couple weeks, kind of unexpectedly. They've got a little movement at guard, and this was a group that heading into the fall camp was kind of, you felt a lot more confident about them. There were a lot of guys returning. These last couple weeks, they definitely shaken some things up that is a little bit of a cause for concern. But yeah, they've got Cade Beresford on the right side. They've got a redshirt freshman actually who they feel really good about at left tackle, and then a really good veteran guy at left guard, and kind of a veteran who's played guard most of his career. Is kind of looks like he might be at center for week one, and then a redshirt freshman at guard. So kind of a weird blend between inexperience and veteran guys, and they're a little bit of an unknown, but I think they'll be okay. And heck, with Talon, they have so much more room for error. like he didn't get sacked very many times last year. He's so good at evading pressure and getting out of the pocket that it's not as big of a concern as if you had like a Hank Bachmeier who mainly operates from the pocket.
Yeah, definitely. And man, I love when it works like that. It just led me to my next question, and that's the good stuff here. So, yeah, you basically got me. How good is the Broncos combination at running back in George Holani and Ashton Genty? And I do want to make sure to include, like you mentioned, Taylor Green in there because he had
Yeah,
586 yards and 10 touchdowns last year. So,
yeah. I mean, it is. It's got to be without a doubt the best running back tandem in the group of five. I'd put it up against, definitely the top 10 of all college football. I mean, these two guys are that good. You look at Holani last year, rushed for over 1,100 yards, 10 touchdowns. Genty was a true freshman who just came kind of out of nowhere. Texas wasn't a super highly rated recruit. Had like came from a military family, bounced around, like played like high school football in like Italy and Florida and Texas, and kind of flew under the radar a little bit. He shows up. The dude looks like he's 25 years old. I mean, just got the Ezekiel Elliott six pack. He was an absolute monster. So good at finding holes, changing direction, and then I mean, he's only like 5'7", 5'8" max. Very low center of gravity, kind of can hide offensive linemen and then find his hole. Those two together are so deadly. I would not be surprised at all if each of them get over 1,000 yards, and I wouldn't be surprised if Taylor Green kind of gets close to 700, 800 this year. The interesting thing is they've kind of done some things in practice recently where they have Genty as like a slot receiver, which he played a lot in high school. And it's a way, the new offensive coordinator, Bush Hamden, is kind of thinking to himself, hey, I've got to find a way to get my three best playmakers involved in Green, Genty, and Holani. And he's tinkering with different ways of getting them on the field. And so that might be one of those things too, where, hey, maybe Genty only runs for 700 yards, but maybe he's got 500 yards receiving. Maybe he, becomes this great slot receiver who can also, get carries when Holani's, tired or something. So they have so many options, so many weapons in that backfield. I would expect Boise State to kind of be a real ground and pound team and try and rely very heavily on clock management.
definitely. And I mean, with all those options, I guess I'll hop over to UW first and then slip back to Boise State. UW has, ZTF should be returning the line, at least for a full season. Braylon Trice is arguably maybe the best pass rusher in the nation. I believe they got a guy named Josh Durfee. But the thing
Yeah,
is, when you have multiple options like Boise State does, it can actually kind of counteract that a little bit. And like
yeah,
I know maybe some people may have like perceptions on Group of Five, Power Five, whatever, and maybe that is right to some degree. But Boise State is a winning football team. Take away Group of Five, take away Power Five. That's a team that's going to find a way. Unless
yeah,
Washington is actually like a college football playoff team, that's a team that's probably going to find a way to compete. Historically, Boise State's been good. So, kind of my
yeah.
thoughts on that. Do you have a favorite out of the trio of returning receivers in Billy Bowen, Stephen Cobbs, or maybe even a lesser known guy in Eric McAllister?
Yeah, I think Steph Cobbs is going to definitely have his catches. He's going to move to the slot and probably have, 50, 55 catches. But I'm really interested for Eric McAllister. I mean, he's a guy, from a real small high school in East Texas, didn't have much, hype coming out of high school, redshirted his first year. And then last season, kind of midway through the year, came on as this deep ball threat and had a nice catch against BYU, stepped up in a couple other games, and all of a sudden, he became one of Taylor Green's favorite targets toward the end of the season, especially downfield. He's so good at adjusting his body midair, finishing 50-50 catches, and I think he's going to be one of those dudes when they do want to go deep and take a shot that Taylor's going to be looking for Eric McAllister deep. So I expect he has almost close to double-digit touchdowns and really gets involved in the vertical passing game.
Yeah, and this could be it could be a weakness for UW. Last year, they ranked 100th in the nation in pass defense, which is a little bit different than the Jimmy Lake UW secondaries, which were usually they were always really good. I know he
Yeah.
didn't necessarily work out as head coach, But so the pass defense for UW could be exposed a little bit, so that should be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah.
And then I'll combine two questions here. Pretty simple though. So I haven't really heard anything out of the tight end position. Is there a name I should know there? And then kind of just to round out the offense, is there anything else that I missed or anything else you would like to add about Boise's offense?
Yeah, I mean they've got a kind of a 6-year tight end in Riley Smith, but Boise State for whatever reason these like last 3 years, even with different offensive coordinators, never haven't found a way to really get the tight end involved much. This is a group that hasn't had Boise State hasn't had like a 250 hasn't had a tight end with over 250 yards in like 5 or 6 years. Like it's just very weird that they haven't kind of found a home for a tight end. I don't know if that's going to change with Bush Hamden. I wouldn't expect it to change a whole lot. Boise State's almost kind of used it as an extra blocker a lot of the time. So, yeah, I don't think they're a team that's really going to beat you with the tight end necessarily. And then I guess the only thing is like, Bush Hamden, he was the offensive coordinator at Missouri last year under Eli Drinkwitz. This is a former backup quarterback. He was the backup during the 07 Fiesta Bowl against Oklahoma. He was Kellen Moore's backup. This is a guy with a lot, deep roots to Boise State. And him coming in as offensive coordinator has provided a lot of excitement in Boise, a lot of excitement in the locker room. And Andy Avalos at any moment really likes to praise what he's been able to bring. We don't exactly know kind of his system. They kind of quiet a lot of that stuff, but he's really trying to go real pro style. He's making the quarterbacks learn all the NFL jargon, all the NFL play calls, and really trying to set it up like that. And so watching this game week 1, he might not have a tougher test, and we're going to really see what his offense is made of right out of the gate.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good little ad there for sure. All right. Hopping over to the defensive side of the ball, pretty plain, simple place to start. How do you feel the Broncos replace 6 starters from last year's team? And is there just how do you feel they replace that?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because like Boise State is not gonna replace talent like the way other schools in the country do right now. They like really pride themselves as a developmental program, which is such a contrary thing to say in the era of the transfer portal. So like you look across their defense, I mean, I'm trying to think right now. Like, I don't know if they have a single transfer portal kid who's going to start on defense. Heck, I don't think they'll have one on offense either. Now that I think about it, which is crazy. I mean, that's just like that doesn't happen in college football today. So it's one of those things where you've just got to rely that the coaches know what they're talking about, because you're going to look at some of these starters. They're starting a 5th-year defensive tackle who has 18 tackles in his career. They're starting a starting safety for J.L. Skinner, who got drafted by the Broncos. He's got 30 tackles and no interceptions. But these guys stick around at Boise State. It's just very odd. I think the best kind of thing you can say is last year they had the same situation at linebacker. They had to replace a veteran, and all of a sudden this guy, DJ Schramm, in his 5th year is like never made a start. And then he becomes like a first-team All-Mountain West. And it's one of those things where, hey, they have depth. They just don't always have to use it. And these guys stay so loyal to Boise State in an era where there's basically no loyalty. And you kind of just have to trust that the coaches are evaluating them correctly, because, other than that, there's not much to go off of.
Definitely. I mean, and that speaks to the culture of the program. And that goes back to, again, that winning nature. And obviously, I don't know the insides like you do, but people would leave, especially in this day and age of college football. I mean, Colorado is 722,000, so I mean, their whole team's new.
Yeah, Colorado's had more transfers in a week than Boise State's ever had, I think.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then I almost forgot, but for whatever reason, they let me pick the players of the week for Super West. So Boise State is included in that. And last year, man, he made my job so much easier. Him and actually another guy from Fresno State, David Perales and DJ Strim. Those are the two names that I could always look at their stats, and I was like, you know what? If no one else killed it, I know I have a player of the week. So
Yep.
like every time too. So actually, wasn't that transition was not planned or as smooth. Wish it would have been, but we will hop over to the defensive line from the linebacker
Yeah.
core now. How dangerous of a pass rusher is Dimitri Washington? And then I guess it kind of caught me off guard what you said. I heard they got some transfers on the D line, but you're thinking it's going to be mostly returners.
At least on the starters. I mean, there's going to be depth at the edge positions in the interior that, the transfers. They got a kid from Iowa State named Howard Brown, a kid from Northern Arizona named Sheldon Newton, a kid from Utah named Tyler Wiegis. I mean, those guys are going to play during a game just in the defensive line rotation, but they're not going to start. It doesn't matter too much on the D line. But going back to your question, yeah, I think Boise State is actually going to be better than expected on the outsides. They've got Dimitri Washington, who was one of the best pass rushers in the Mountain West last year before he got injured. He was so disruptive. Probably should have had a couple more sacks that he missed. And then they moved a defensive tackle, Ahmed Hassanin, who's like a junior, over from D tackle to DN. The kid lost like 20 pounds. Is one of the faster defensive players, like regardless of position on the team. Like somehow he's running 20 miles an hour, which I don't know how you can do that at 270. It's pretty crazy. But the interior is a little bit of a concern. I mean, they're bringing back two guys, but two guys that just haven't had a ton of production or experience, like being the dudes on the defensive line. And you need those interior guys to take up two offensive linemen sometimes. Last year they had it a little bit. Scott Matlock was so disruptive that there were times that two offensive linemen had to go on him, and all of a sudden a gap opened up. Against Michael Penix Jr., I mean, they have to get pressure. They have to. He only got sacked 5 times last year. 3 of those came in losses. 2 more were in a close game to Cal, which probably shouldn't have been a close game. That is the key for Boise State, and it's not great because defensive line is still a huge question mark for them.
Yeah, and the one thing about Penix Jr. is I know we got to give it to him for what he did last year, but at the same time, more so than other quarterbacks, if he does get hit, he's been injured his whole college career, barring last
Yeah.
year. And as someone who was a bench warming basketball player, as you mentioned at the top, I hurt my knee like 5 or 6 times, and just you think about it a little bit. You never say it. Now that I'm done playing, I can say it, but you do think about it. So if Boise State can hit him a little bit, it should be interesting to see how he responds.
Yeah.
Particularly since he was so clean in the pocket last year. We already touched on DJ Schramm, but who do you feel needs to step up alongside him in the linebacking core? I know you got a guy, Ezekiel Noah, a couple other names throughout there, Ty Tanner or Andrew Simpson.
Yeah, Noah actually graduated, so he's not there. But Andrew Simpson is going to be the dude who likely plays alongside DJ Schramm. He's a young guy who last year, I mean, you would see him, and it was kind of odd because he was so, I don't know, he would make plays all the time when he was on the field. He found ways to get into the backfield, a couple tackles for loss, a couple times he was chasing the quarterback, and then the coaches would talk about him and be like, yeah, he made plays, but like he didn't do his job. Like basically a lot of the stuff was kind of like outside the system, which wasn't the greatest, compliment at all. But this season, I mean, they've really, really raved about him and just his dedication to the playbook and kind of working within their system. What helps with that is like Boise State is probably always going to have good linebackers as long as they have their coaching staff. I mean, their defensive coordinator is also their linebackers coach, and then their head coach Andy Avalos is a former linebacker and linebackers coach who works really closely with that unit. And so, there's a lot of resources for the linebackers right now to, get better when they want to. And I think you'll see that this season with Andrew Simpson, that after a summer of kind of hearing from Andy Avalos and Spencer Danielson and working with those two, that he's going to grow a ton.
Yeah, and with a team, as we were touching on earlier, with Boise State, just obviously has so many guys staying in the program and maybe just understanding the system a little bit better than other college teams.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is good to have a random guy who will kind of fly off and maybe
Yeah.
maybe not follow the X's and O's so much.
Yeah.
So
As long as you make the play, hey, there's no complaining.
exactly, but what you said holds true. You got to make the play. You don't make the play, you could it
You're
changes
not
things a
playing
little bit.
anymore. Yeah.
So, yeah, so that's a part of it for sure. And so actually, this is my last kind of football question. Just researching the secondary, I think we touched on it a little bit. They lost cornerback Caleb Biggers,
Yeah.
nickel Tariq Jones, and safety. You said JL Skinner. How do they replace this, particularly against a Washington? I know people want to say this or that about Washington, but the one thing we should know outside their pass rush is that between Michael Penix Jr., Rome Odunze, Jalen McMillan, and Polk, they should have one of the best passing offenses in the nation. So, how do you feel Boise
Yeah.
State is going to hang, losing so much in the secondary?
Yeah. I honestly, it's crazy because like I think they'll be okay this season. I mean, the Mountain West is just not a great conference. There's not a lot of good quarterbacks in the Mountain West. Like Boise State secondary is going to be fine for most of the season, but I don't think they're going to be fine this game. Like, there's just too many guys. Washington has too many guys, and you watch their games from last year. It's like they're always open. It's just the scheme they run. They're always open. And Boise State's got two corners. One, Markel Reed, who has like been injured like the last 3 years. He's literally like played like 4 games in the last since COVID. Last year he got injured in the first quarter of the first game and missed the whole season with an ACL. The other guy, Jalen Clark, is a young dude who's got like an NFL frame, but just is kind of inexperienced. Played a little bit last year and was okay. The safeties, I think they're fine. They've got a guy in Rodney Robinson who's back there and basically started every game last season. They got a nickel who played a ton last year, and they've got a another safety filling in for Skinner, who's like one of those loyal fifth year guys who hasn't played a ton, but knows where he needs to be almost at all times. Always gets his teammates love playing with him, and he's a dude who's probably not going to make a ton of mistakes. That's what you need in a secondary against this Washington team. So yeah, I mean, I feel really comfortable about them for most games, but like this isn't most games, and uh, I don't. You could have some of the best corners in the country, and I don't think it matters. So yeah, that's the concern.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I'm really high on Roma Dunze. I think he's
He's
just a
so
complete stud. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. I mean, all three of those guys could be like the best receiver on what 60, 70, 80% of college teams. Like it's crazy. And then you have all three of them working in a system that just, finds space and a quarterback who can, knows how to operate. I mean, you're right. It's one of the best offenses in college football.
Yeah, at least on paper. At least on paper. Obviously, it's got to be
Yeah.
played.
Yeah.
But I do think that one thing you touched on a little bit with kind of some experience at safety for Boise. They obviously may not be able to stop Duskies, but you could maybe limit a couple of big plays. And
Yeah.
again, in a winning program, if you keep the game within 7-10 points, you're not going to count out a team like the Broncos. I mean, I'm not going to throw out some random school. I almost just disrespected the school, but they're not some scrub team. So if they keep this game close, like it's
Yeah.
going to be fun. So I just want to see if those safeties can maybe limit a few big plays. So
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing with Boise State this year, too, is with those running backs, like they're going to run the ball a lot. They want to control the clock, which is going to be good against a Washington team that you want to keep their offense off the field. So, if they can have a couple drives around 8, 10 minutes, all of a sudden Michael Penix Jr. doesn't have time to do anything. And all you need is a turnover or two, and, the game's in hand a little bit.
yeah, I hear you. I hear you. And speaking of the game, is it too early for you to do? This is kind of the last question or two,
Yeah.
and then I'll have kind of like little one or two funner question type stuff. Is it too early? Actually, shoot, we're almost at that time of year. You got a game prediction? The game's actually pretty close.
I'm trying to think. Okay. I'll say I'll say 38-27 Washington.
Okay, yeah, I'm thinking something. You know what? I can't steal your score, but I am thinking something similar. So I'm gonna go we'll say 41 28 Washington.
Okay.
Uh that's kind of my early thoughts. And then just my last question here is, do you have is there anything else you'd like to add about Boise State, the college football landscape in general, or just yeah, I mean, things are so different right now. So anything you want to add?
Yeah, it's weird. It's like you know, obviously you're covering, West Coast teams and stuff, and it's so odd to kind of there's so many of these Mountain West schools that like feel like they belong in, Big 12 or formerly the Pac 12. And it's going to be, I don't know, it's going to be weird these next 5-10 years to see, like, do they keep their seat at the table in the college football playoff, um, with the Pac 12 dissolving? What does that look like? Do any of these schools like have like a Boise State 2010 run? Like, could that happen where, a Boise State or, maybe Oregon State or Washington State, if they join the Mountain West, like could someone be dominant for 3 or 4 years and, maybe work themselves into a bigger conference? Or is that just not going to happen in the landscape of college football today? I mean, it's all so interesting. And, my hope is that, there there is an at-large bid for, or a conference championship bid that would allow the highest ranked group of 5 team in. And because what it keeps 50 something 60 fan bases invested through the whole year. And that's the thing, is like, if that isn't open, there are people in Boise who are just like, well, we're completely shut out now. And that would be the same for Fresno and San Diego and Memphis and Tulane and Coastal Carolina. And so, that's one of the things is like, um, early on when you don't really care about the group of 5 teams, if you're, a fan of a different program, like, who cares? But being around it so often, it's like, man, that would be a real detriment if that goes away.
Yeah, definitely. And I've always considered myself kind of, I guess not anymore because I like got older and stopped playing video games. So I always consider myself like a Madden nerd. And I just like, dude, there's good football everywhere. And it's just a
Yeah.
game of matchups. I mean, that's what we're saying. We're talking Washington, Boise State. You could have Boise State, Fresno State, Boise State, San Diego State. Hell, they're not even the podcast state. Fresno State, San Diego State. There's a lot of good matchups, man.
Yeah.
So just losing that, but like you said, more importantly, the fan bases, because
Yeah.
that's what has always felt college football is. And that's like, it's just little things. Like as a kid, I'm gonna hop to basketball really quick, but it's like I always would talk about Gonzaga basketball and their sense
Yeah.
of pride. Like as a kid, like I had no connection to Boise State, but we all remember when they beat Oklahoma, and that now there's this like football culture in Boise, and it just
Yeah.
so yeah, I hear what you're saying. You probably said it a little bit better, but I hear what you're saying for sure.
Yeah.
Um, and then, oh shoot, that's another football question. So basically, the final two, as always, basically, do you have a favorite sport outside of football, or is it football all day, all the time?
No, I mean, I grew up in Phoenix, so big Suns fan. Love love watching basketball, but I love following baseball in the summertime. And when your team's good, come September, October, like there's nothing better than like the MLB playoffs and the chase to get in. So yeah, probably baseball or basketball.
Baseball. I don't think we've had any baseballs yet. I think that's the first one. That's
Really?
I like that. Yeah, we had a guy who said football. We had a guy who said hockey. Okay, I'm not going to go through the whole freaking list here. Yeah, we may have had one other baseball, but seriously, very few. This person I can recall off the top of my head at
Cool.
least. And then I guess while we're not too far away from it, I'm actually going to the Mariners game this Saturday. I got a little birthday gift, and
There you go.
they're in the midst of the playoff run. So exactly what
Yeah,
you're just yeah.
there's so many Mariners fans in Boise, and so they'll every day they're, oh, Mariners won 8 in a row. We're getting excited. They're all trying to hoping they get Shohei these next couple months. So yeah, I feel you.
Oh, I need to hang out with more Boise fans if that's the rumors. I like that. That's good stuff, man. And then lastly, the question I always say, not sure, I don't know exactly why they gave me a show, but since they did, I have to ask it. I was a huge wrestling fan as a kid, stayed away for 10 years and got back into the WWE recently. Do you have like a favorite wrestler as a kid, as an adult, or just you can say no too if it's a little bit too nerdy.
I like I didn't watch it a ton, but I loved The Undertaker. Partly because like he kind of scared the hell out of me as a kid, like especially when he would do the eye thing, put it in the back of his head, like that was crazy. But I also just like loved the longevity of him, like to be able to watch him as a kid, and then like during COVID, me and my buddies are like gathering in a in an apartment drinking beer, like watching the Undertaker like go. We're placing bets on it because there's nothing else to do during COVID. And it's like he was just a guy that I don't know. I don't. He seemed old in like 2006, and then you're watching him in 2020. You're like, how is he doing this? And you so probably the Undertaker. I don't know. Who is it for you?
I would say so. My favorite wrestler. Ooh, that's man. I don't know if I've ever actually been asked that. And for consistency, I hope I didn't answer this before. Off the top of my head, I'm gonna go kind of an obscure high flyer named Rob Van Dam. I like that he just did kind of unique stuff. But a more classic answer, kind of relating to what you were saying, is Rey Mysterio. I
Oh
love
yeah,
he's been around forever, and he's actually still around. And there's just a nostalgia feel whenever
yeah.
I see him on TV and I'm making really solid decisions in life. So, but yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Unless you got anything else you want to add about
No, I
football.
appreciate you having me on. Thank you.